What would you do if you woke up face to face with a jaguar in the middle of the Amazon jungle? A young man was separated from friends, betrayed and stranded after a failed expedition into the Bolivian jungle. This is his story. Yossi Ghinsberg had finished his service in the Israeli Navy. He had gone on an Africa to Mexico trip. He set his eyes on the Amazon jungle and dreamed of exploring its uninhabited heart. Finally, in 1981, the 22-year-old Yossi hitchhiked from Venezuela to Colombia. There, he met Marcus Stam, a Swiss teacher. The pair became friends and traveled to La Paz, Bolivia together. There, Yossi encountered Karl Ruprechter, a mysterious Austrian purporting to be a geologist. Karl informed Yossi that he was organizing a trip into Bolivia's unexplored Amazon region in order to mine gold in a remote town. Excited, Yossi begged Karl to let him come along. Marcus and American photographer Kevin Gale also accompanied them. Having never been acquainted before, the four of them set out on an adventure in Bolivia in search of riches. The Bolivians had warned the foreigners of the many dangers that were waiting for them in the jungle. Ignoring their appeals, the group began preparations for their expedition. They stocked up on food and supplies at a local village, Asariamas. Then, following Karl's claims of having visited an ancient indigenous village deep in the forest, the group trekked up the Asariamas River and across mountains. They ran out of food and resorted to shooting and eating monkeys for survival. I would have eaten anything. I would have eaten human flesh. When you reach that level of hunger, nothing is disgusting. Nothing is appalling. Yossi wrote about this experience. Marcus could not bring himself to eat the monkeys and grew weaker and weaker. Hungry and tired, the group decided to abandon their search of the indigenous people. Back at Asariamas, Karl proposed a new plan. Travel up the Tuichi River to a small gold quarry, then back to La Paz. Persuaded, Yossi, Marcus, and Kevin worked with him and villagers to build a raft. They set off on their new journey downriver until they reached the Tuichi-Ipurama River Junction. It was there that Karl abruptly informed them about San Pedro Canyon, a treacherous system of waterfalls, rapids, and rocks that are not appropriate for boating. Karl, claiming that he could not swim, refused to continue on the trip. Karl's deceitful betrayal led to the group diving into two groups. Marcus decided to follow Karl back to another village on foot. Yossi and photographer Kevin continued rafting downriver. The four men planned to reunite after their adventures in La Paz before Christmas time. Yossi and Kevin's raft neared a waterfall. Terrified, they lost control of the raft and were thrown into the water. Miraculously, Kevin made it to shore. Horrified, he looked on as the water carried Yossi away. He attempted to jump in to rescue his friend, but saw a strong whirlpool, and for the first time in his life, he was afraid of the water. After Yossi disappeared from sight, Kevin was faced with a difficult decision. Should he save his own life and flee back to the village? Or should he cross the treacherous rapids to look for Yossi? Courageously, Kevin chose to cross the river in search of Yossi. Being in a hurry, he wasn't as careful as he intended to be, and his feet were being injured by sharp stones and branches. With only his machete to help him capture small animals, he found himself losing strength. By the fifth day, his feet were oozing pus and bloody. He could walk no further. He brought himself to the river and floated downstream on a fallen log. Kevin knew death was imminent if he didn't get out of the jungle soon. Only a short time later, he was amazed to see two local fishermen who pulled him to shore, rescuing him. Yossi was not so fortunate. He floated downstream, struggling to keep his head above water as he was rammed into large boulders and trees. The level of pain is beyond my ability to describe, he said, describing the half an hour he was dragged along by the raging waters. He was carried over the edge of the waterfall before making it to the riverbank. In nothing short of a miracle, he was able to find his backpack that had washed ashore. For 4 days, he traveled upriver, frantically searching for Kevin. He finally realized that he was completely alone and lost in the jungle. Deep in an uncharted area of the Amazon, Yossi fought daily to survive. On his 6th night in the forest, he found himself face to face with a jaguar. He remembered a trick he had seen in a James Bond film. He fought off the fierce predator, creating an instant flamethrower using his lighter and mosquito repellent. In the 2nd week of his solo survival, his surroundings were flooded and he almost drowned. As a result of the flooding, his foot had begun to rot from a fungal infection. While traveling through a bog, he sank twice. Yossi was desperately lonely. Just when he felt like giving up on his fight for survival, a woman joined him in his journey. He talked with her constantly, but she never spoke a word in return. Yossi even built extra space in the camp for her to sleep in. One day the woman disappeared. She had been in hallucination the entire time, a figment of his imagination. Alone with no supplies or food, he ate whatever he could find in nature, such as berries and eggs taken from the nests of birds. The infection on Yossi's foot became worse and increasingly painful. The young man felt like his feet would give way and wouldn't carry him any further. In a desperate act to live, he stood under a tree and shook it, showering himself with fire ants. Using the pain and adrenaline rush as fuel, he found the strength to carry on. Yossi wondered if he would ever make it out of the jungle alive, or if he'd die alone. He even considered ending his own life to end his horrible ordeal. However, Kevin, his travel companion, had not forgotten Yossi. After Kevin had made it back to the city La Paz, he requested help from the Israeli and Austrian consulates, hoping they would prepare rescue missions in search of his 3 friends. He was shocked to hear from the Austrian consulate authorities that Karl, who had guided the group, then abandoned the trip, was actually a criminal wanted by Interpol, the International Criminal Police Organization. Karl actually wasn't a geologist as he had claimed, and there was no gold quarry in the area. He was an Austrian scam artist with no training or experience navigating the wild jungle. The perilous trip had been based on Karl's lies. Kevin and the indigenous people had begun a search and rescue mission. 3 days into their search, Yossi had made it back to the river and heard the sound of an engine. It was Kevin and the search party. It had been 3 weeks after Yossi had first been declared missing. Yossi was in such terrible shape that he spent next 3 months in hospital recovering from the harrowing nightmare he had been through. Besides his fungal infection, he had grubs burrowing into his skin and had been at the mercy of voracious termites and stinging insects. He was severely malnourished, feverish, and filthy. It was clear that if Kevin had not been a faithful friend and went back to find Yossi, he would have died. Search missions were also organized to find Karl and Marcus. However, they were never found. They never returned to La Paz as agreed upon. Yossi's extraordinary survival amazed the local indigenous people and shocked the world. Since then, he has written his book Back from Tuichi, which was later re-released as Jungle, a harrowing true story of adventure, danger, and survival. He has also written a book called Laws of the Jungle, Jaguars Don't Need Self-Help Books. A movie adaptation of his incredible story, Jungle, was released in 2017 starring Daniel Radcliffe. 10 years after barely surviving the Bolivian jungle, he went back to set up a solar-powered eco-lodge there. He lived there from 1992 to 1995 with the indigenous locals to train and help them manage the lodge. He has founded 12 centers to help treat and do research on opiate addiction. Yossi Ghinsberg has founded multiple companies as an entrepreneur and spoken around the world as a motivational speaker. He has 4 children and currently lives in Australia.